The $1,000,000 Dream. A Money Mastery Audiobook. Welcome back to Money Mastery Audiobooks, the channel where ordinary people learn the extraordinary habits of the wealthy. Before we begin, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and tap the like button below. It helps this channel grow, and it helps us keep bringing you the knowledge that can change your financial future. Now, sit back, relax, and let's begin. Introduction. Somewhere right now, a person is lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, running numbers in their head. Rent. Groceries. The credit card bill that never seems to shrink. And somewhere in that same city, another person is lying awake too, but for a different reason. They are not worrying about money. They are dreaming about what to do with it. Both of these people started with the same 24 hours in a day. Both of them were born without a manual for how money works. The difference between them is not luck, and it is not some secret bloodline of financial genius. The difference is a dream, a specific kind of dream, one that is not a fantasy but a plan. This is what we call the $1,000,000 Dream. The phrase might sound like something out of a lottery commercial, but it is not about luck at all. $1,000,000 is simply a marker, a symbol of financial freedom, a point on the map where work becomes optional and choice becomes abundant. Whether your personal number is 100,000 or 10 million, the psychology and the mechanics are the same. You need a dream vivid enough to survive contact with reality, and you need a set of principles strong enough to carry that dream across years of ordinary Tuesdays. Most people never become wealthy, not because they lack intelligence or opportunity, but because they never let themselves dream specifically enough. They say things like, "I wish I had more money," the way they might wish for good weather, a passive hope thrown into the wind. But the people who actually build wealth do something different. They construct a dream with edges and details. They know what the number is. They know what it will buy. They know why it matters. And critically, they know what they are willing to do, day after day, to get there. In this audiobook, we are going to walk through 6 chapters that will reshape how you see money, ambition, and the process of building real wealth. We will talk about why most dreams die in the first 90 days, and how to build one that survives. We will talk about the mathematics of compounding, the psychology of delayed gratification, the discipline of multiple income streams, the mindset shift from consumer to owner, and the long game of building something that outlives your own daily effort. By the end of this journey, you will not just understand the $1,000,000 Dream. You will have a blueprint for building your own. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Anatomy of a Real Dream. Every person who has ever built significant wealth started with an image in their mind before they ever had the money in their bank account. This is not mysticism. It is simple psychology. The mind moves toward what it vividly imagines, and it protects what it clearly defines. A vague wish protects nothing, because there is nothing solid to defend. This is why so many people set financial goals in January and abandon them by March. Their dream was foggy. It had no shape. A real dream, the kind that survives, has 3 qualities. First, it is specific. Not, "I want to be rich," but "I want $1,000,000 in liquid investments by the time I am 45, so that I can leave a job that drains me and spend my afternoons with my children." Notice how much more powerful that sentence is. It has a number, a timeline, and a reason. The number tells your mind what to build toward. The timeline creates urgency. The reason creates emotional fuel, because numbers alone rarely motivate anyone at 11 at night when they are tired and the couch is calling louder than the spreadsheet. Second, a real dream is written down. There is a well-documented pattern among people who achieve significant financial goals: they write them. Not because ink has magic powers, but because writing forces clarity, and clarity is what allows a goal to survive contact with a bad day. When your dream lives only in your head, it can quietly negotiate with you. It can shrink when you are tired. But a dream on paper, or on a screen you look at daily, holds its shape. It does not negotiate. It simply waits for you to catch up to it. Third, A real dream has a why that is bigger than money itself. Money is a tool, not a destination. If your only reason for wanting $1 million is the number itself, you will find that the number, once reached, feels strangely hollow. But if your reason is freedom, or security for your family, or the ability to walk away from work that no longer fits who you are becoming, then the number becomes a doorway rather than a wall. People who chase money for its own sake often burn out before they arrive. People who chase what money enables tend to arrive and keep going, because the dream was never really about the digits. It was about the life those digits could unlock. Here is an exercise worth doing right now, even as you listen. Picture the exact life you are building toward. Not a fantasy board of yachts and mansions, but your actual life. What time do you wake up? What does your morning look like? Who is around you? What work, if any, are you still doing, because many wealthy people keep working, just on their own terms. Hold that picture. That picture is the compass you will return to on every difficult day ahead, and there will be difficult days. The dream is not the easy part. It is the anchor for the hard part. There is also a quieter truth hiding inside this chapter, one that most people overlook. The dream must be yours, not someone else's. So many people chase a version of wealth handed to them by advertising, by neighbors, by the curated lives they scroll past online. They want the car because the car looks like success. They want the house because the house looks like arrival. But borrowed dreams rarely survive the discipline required to fund them, because deep down, the person chasing them does not actually want what they are chasing. They want to be seen wanting it. Real wealth building requires an honest inventory of what you actually value, stripped of comparison, stripped of performance. When your dream is honest, the discipline that follows feels less like sacrifice and more like alignment. By the end of this first chapter, you should walk away with one clear task. Define your number. Define your timeline. Define your why. Write all three down somewhere you will see them daily. This single act, simple as it sounds, separates the dreamers who become builders from the dreamers who remain dreamers. Chapter 2, The Quiet Power of Compounding. If dreaming builds the direction, compounding builds the distance. This is the single most underestimated force in personal finance, and it is often described as the eighth wonder of the world, not because the math is complicated, but because the results feel almost unbelievable to anyone who has not watched them unfold with patience. Here is the simplest way to understand it. Imagine you invest $10,000 and it grows at an average of 8% per year, a reasonable long-term average for a diversified portfolio. In the first year, you earn $800. That feels modest, almost unremarkable. But in year 2, you are no longer earning 8% on $10,000. You are earning 8% on $10,800, because last year's gain is now part of the base. This process repeats, quietly, year after year, and the curve that looks flat in the early years begins to bend upward with startling force in the later ones. This is why so many financial educators say the same thing in different words: the most important investment decision you will ever make is not which stock to pick, but how early you start. A person who invests a modest amount starting at 25 will very often outpace a person who invests twice as much starting at 35, simply because compounding needs time far more than it needs size. Time is the ingredient money cannot buy back. You can always find more money to invest. You can never find more years. This truth carries an uncomfortable implication. Every year you delay starting is not simply a year lost. It is a year of compounding lost, and because compounding builds on itself, a delay early in the process costs far more than a delay late in the process. This is why the wealthy so often repeat the phrase, "Start now, even small." They are not being polite. They are describing math. A person who starts with $50 a month today is, in the long run, often better positioned than a person who waits 5 years to start with $500 a month, because those 5 years of lost compounding are nearly impossible to fully recover. Compounding does not only apply to investment accounts. It applies to skills, to relationships, to reputation, to health. A person who reads consistently compounds knowledge. A person who shows up reliably compounds trust. A person who exercises consistently compounds energy and longevity, which in turn extends the number of years they have to let their financial compounding work. Wealth building is rarely one single explosive decision. It is 1,000 small, boring, repeated decisions that stack quietly in the background of an ordinary life. The danger, of course, is that compounding is invisible in its early stages. This is precisely why most people abandon it. They save for 6 months, look at the balance, feel unimpressed, and quit. They are judging a marathon by its first mile. The people who succeed are not smarter than everyone else. They have simply made peace with the boring middle, the long stretch of years where nothing seems to be happening on the surface, while everything is happening underneath it. Think about it this way. If you could plant a tree that doubled in size every single year, the first few years would look almost disappointing. A small sapling barely taller than your knee, then barely taller than your waist. Anyone watching casually might assume the tree was failing to thrive. But somewhere around year 8 or 9, that same tree, still following the exact same doubling pattern, suddenly towers over the house. Nothing about the pattern changed. What changed was the visible scale of a process that had been working the entire time. Money behaves the same way. The person who gives up in year 3 never sees the tree that was quietly growing the whole time, just below the threshold of visible excitement. Understanding compounding should change how you feel about small choices. The coffee you skip is not really about the coffee. It is about redirecting a small, repeated amount into a system that multiplies it over decades. The point is not deprivation for its own sake. The point is recognizing that consistency, applied over a long enough timeline, is one of the most powerful forces available to an ordinary person with an ordinary income. Chapter 3: The Discipline of Delayed Gratification. There is a famous study from decades ago involving children, a marshmallow, and a simple choice: eat 1 marshmallow now, or wait a short while and receive 2. The children who were able to wait tended, later in life, to show stronger outcomes across several measures of success. The exact interpretation of that study has been debated over the years, but the underlying principle it pointed toward remains one of the most reliable truths in personal finance. The ability to delay a smaller reward now in exchange for a larger reward later is one of the clearest predictors of long-term financial success. This is harder than it sounds, because modern life is engineered against it. Instant purchases, one-click checkout, buy now pay later programs, endless advertising calibrated to make waiting feel unnecessary. Every system around the average consumer is optimized to shorten the gap between desire and consumption. Building wealth requires deliberately working against that current, choosing the longer, less exciting path in a world built to sell you the shorter one. Delayed gratification is not about permanent denial. It is not about living a joyless life so that some future version of you can finally be happy. That framing burns people out and eventually causes them to abandon their financial discipline altogether, often in one large, resentful spending spree. Instead, the healthier version of delayed gratification is a values-based trade. You are not saying no to enjoyment. You are saying yes to a different, larger form of enjoyment, chosen deliberately rather than triggered impulsively. One practical way to build this discipline is what many financial educators call the waiting period rule. Before any non-essential purchase above a certain amount, you commit to waiting a set number of days, often 24 to 72 hours for smaller purchases, and up to 30 days for larger ones. This is not about willpower in the moment, which is often weak and easily overridden by emotion. It is about removing the decision from the emotional moment entirely and placing it into a calmer, more rational future moment. Many purchases that feel urgent in the moment feel completely unnecessary a week later. The waiting period does not require superhuman discipline. It simply requires a system that assumes, correctly, that you are human. Delayed gratification also shows up in how wealthy people treat debt. Consumer debt is, in many ways, the opposite of delayed gratification. It is a mechanism for accessing gratification now while pushing the cost, plus interest, into the future. This is precisely why high-interest consumer debt is one of the most reliable wealth destroyers available. It reverses the natural direction of compounding, working against you instead of for you. Every dollar paid in interest on a credit card is a dollar that could have been compounding in an investment account instead. This is not a moral judgment on people who carry debt. Life happens, and debt is sometimes unavoidable. But understanding this mechanism clearly is what allows a person to prioritize eliminating high-interest debt as an urgent, non-negotiable step on the path to the million-dollar dream. The people who eventually reach significant wealth are rarely people who never wanted anything in the moment. They are people who built the internal muscle to wait, to choose the larger future reward over the smaller immediate one, again and again, until that choice became less about willpower and more about identity. They no longer see themselves as someone resisting temptation. They see themselves as someone who simply does not buy things that do not fit the life they are building. Chapter 4: Building Multiple Streams of Income. A single paycheck is a fragile foundation for a million-dollar dream. It is not that a salary is unimportant, far from it. A stable income is often the very engine that funds the early years of wealth building. But relying on one single source of income means your entire financial future depends on one employer, one industry, one set of circumstances remaining unchanged. Wealthy individuals, almost without exception, diversify not only their investments but their income itself. The most common categories of additional income fall into a few broad groups. There is earned income, the money you trade hours and effort for directly, such as a job or freelance work. There is investment income, the money your assets generate on their own, such as dividends, interest, or capital gains. There is business income, profit generated from a venture you own, even a small one. And there is passive or semi-passive income, money generated by an asset or system you built once and that continues producing with reduced ongoing effort, such as royalties, rental income, or digital products. The goal is not necessarily to have 5 income streams by next month. That kind of rushed diversification often leads to 5 mediocre efforts rather than one strong one. The goal is intentional sequencing. Most people who successfully build multiple income streams start by strengthening their primary earned income, using that stability to fund the slow, unglamorous building of a second stream, whether that is a small business, an investment portfolio, or a skill-based side venture. Only once that second stream shows real traction do they typically add a third. This channel itself is a perfect example of the principle in action. Creating audiobook content, building an audience, and eventually reaching monetization thresholds is the construction of exactly this kind of asset. In the early months, the effort clearly outweighs the return. This is normal, and it is not a sign of failure. It is simply the nature of building any asset that eventually produces income with less ongoing effort than a traditional job. The early unpaid months are not wasted time. They are the foundation being poured before anything visible is built on top of it. Multiple income streams also provide something beyond money itself, they provide resilience. A person with one job and no other income is entirely exposed if that job disappears. A person with a stable job, a small investment portfolio, and a modest side income has built-in shock absorbers. If one stream weakens, the others can carry more weight temporarily. This resilience is not just financial. It is psychological. People who have diversified their income tend to report significantly less financial anxiety, because no single event, no single bad quarter, no single difficult boss, holds total power over their future. It is worth being honest about the discipline this requires. Building a second or third income stream almost always means using time that could otherwise go toward rest or entertainment. This is precisely why chapters 1 through 3 of this audiobook matter so much. Without a clear dream, without an understanding of compounding, without the discipline of delayed gratification, the extra effort required to build additional income streams will feel unsustainable. But with those foundations in place, the effort feels less like sacrifice and more like construction, each additional hour laying another brick toward the dream defined back in Chapter 1. There is also a common mistake worth naming directly, because it derails so many well-intentioned people. That mistake is confusing a hobby with a second income stream simply because money is theoretically possible from it. A genuine income stream requires the same basic discipline as any other business decision: a clear target customer, a clear value being offered, and a clear path to being paid consistently, not occasionally. Many people spend months or even years dabbling in a side project that never quite becomes real income, not because the idea was bad, but because it was treated as a hobby rather than a small, serious venture. Treating a second income stream with the same seriousness you would want a business partner to bring is often the difference between a project that fades quietly and one that eventually stands on its own. Chapter 5: Thinking like an owner, not a consumer. There is a subtle but powerful shift in identity that separates people who build wealth from people who simply earn income, and it comes down to a single question asked repeatedly, almost unconsciously, throughout daily life: am I consuming, or am I owning? The consumer mindset asks, what can this purchase do for me right now? The owner mindset asks, what can this dollar produce for me over time? Neither mindset is inherently evil, and no reasonable person lives entirely in one or the other. Even the wealthiest individuals spend money on things that bring simple enjoyment. The distinction is not about eliminating consumption. It is about which mindset holds the steering wheel most of the time. A person operating primarily from a consumer mindset sees a paycheck and asks what it can be exchanged for immediately: a new gadget, a nicer car, an upgraded lifestyle that matches a rising income. A person operating from an owner mindset sees the same paycheck and asks what portion of it can be converted into an asset, something that will still be producing value long after the initial excitement of a purchase has faded. This is why two people with identical incomes can end up in dramatically different financial positions after 10 years. Their income was the same. Their mindset was not. The owner mindset also changes how a person views their own time and skills. A consumer mindset trades time directly for money and stops there. An owner mindset asks how that time and skill can be captured into something reusable, something that continues to produce value beyond the hour originally spent. A teacher who only teaches trades time for money in the classic sense. A teacher who records their lessons, packages their expertise into a course, or builds a following around their knowledge has begun converting time into an asset, something that can continue to generate value while they sleep. This shift explains why so many wealthy individuals describe owning businesses, real estate, or intellectual property rather than simply working high-paying jobs. It is not that high salaries cannot build wealth; they absolutely can, especially when paired with disciplined investing. But ownership introduces a multiplier that a salary alone rarely provides, because an asset can produce income independent of your direct hourly presence. Shifting into an owner mindset does not require quitting your job or taking reckless risks. It often starts with something as simple as changing how you view a portion of every paycheck. Instead of seeing all of it as spendable income, the owner mindset treats a portion of it as seed capital, money whose sole purpose is to be planted into something that grows, whether that is a retirement account, a small business fund, or a skill-building investment in yourself. Over years, this single mental shift, applied consistently, tends to produce dramatically different outcomes than an identical income spent entirely on consumption. It also helps to notice how language itself reveals which mindset is currently in control. A consumer mindset tends to describe purchases as rewards, phrases like, "I deserve this," or "I earned this treat after a hard week." An owner mindset is not opposed to rewards, but it tends to describe financial decisions in terms of direction, phrases like, "Does this move me closer to or further from the life I am building?" Paying close attention to your own internal language around money, for even a single week, often reveals which mindset has been quietly steering most of your decisions. Chapter 6: Playing the Long Game. The final piece of the million-dollar dream is perhaps the least glamorous and the most necessary: patience applied over a long, uninterrupted stretch of time. Everything discussed so far, the specific dream, the power of compounding, the discipline of delayed gratification, the building of multiple income streams, the owner mindset, all of it depends on one final ingredient to actually produce results. That ingredient is time held steady, without abandoning the plan halfway through. Most financial plans do not fail because they were badly designed. They fail because they were abandoned partway through, usually during a difficult stretch when the results were not yet visible. This is the most dangerous period in any wealth-building journey, the long middle section where the initial motivation has faded, the eventual results have not yet arrived, and nothing seems to be happening except the slow, repetitive discipline of saving, investing, and building. It is precisely in this invisible middle stretch that most people quit, and it is precisely why the people who do not quit tend to end up in a category of their own. Playing the long game requires redefining what progress looks like. Progress in the early and middle years of wealth building is rarely visible in the bank balance. It is visible in habits held, in debt not taken on, in a savings rate maintained even during a hard month, in a side business kept alive through a slow season. These invisible forms of progress are just as real as any number on a screen, and learning to recognize them is what allows a person to keep going when the external results have not yet caught up to the internal effort. There is also a necessary honesty required here about setbacks. The long game is never a straight line. Markets fall. Businesses struggle. Unexpected expenses appear at the worst possible time. The million-dollar dream is not built by people who never experience setbacks. It is built by people who treat setbacks as temporary interruptions rather than proof that the plan does not work. A downturn in an investment account is not evidence to sell in a panic. A slow month in a side business is not evidence to shut it down. The long game asks a simple, repeated question during every setback: is the underlying plan still sound, or did the plan itself fail? Most of the time, especially for people following the principles in this audiobook, the plan is still sound. Only the timeline has stretched, and the timeline stretching is not the same as the dream dying. It also helps to surround yourself, even loosely, with people who are playing a similar long game. Motivation is not purely an internal resource that you generate alone through sheer willpower. It is also social, shaped by the expectations and examples of the people around you. A person surrounded entirely by others who spend impulsively and mock the idea of saving will find the long game exhausting, because every decision to stay disciplined will feel like swimming against a current. A person who finds even a small community, online or in person, of people building toward similar goals will find that same discipline far easier to sustain, because it is no longer being generated in isolation. This is, in fact, part of the quiet purpose behind a channel like this one. It exists to be that steady voice in your ear, reminding you the long game is worth playing, especially on the days it does not feel like it. Perhaps the most important reframe of this final chapter is this: the million-dollar dream is not primarily about reaching a number. It is about becoming the kind of person capable of reaching that number, and then sustaining it. The habits built along the way, the discipline, the patience, the owner mindset, the comfort with delayed gratification, these do not disappear once the number is reached. They become the permanent operating system of a wealthy life, which is why so many people who build real wealth continue living relatively modestly even after they could easily spend more. They are not restraining themselves out of fear. They have simply become the kind of person for whom this way of living now feels natural. Conclusion. The million-dollar dream begins, as we discussed in Chapter 1, not with a bank account but with a clear, specific, deeply personal vision of the life you are building toward. It grows, quietly and invisibly at first, through the patient force of compounding, a force that rewards those who start early and stay consistent far more than it rewards those who search for shortcuts. It is protected by the discipline of delayed gratification, the willingness to choose a larger future reward over a smaller immediate one, again and again, until that choice becomes second nature. It is strengthened by multiple income streams, each one adding resilience and reducing the danger of depending on a single source. It is accelerated by an owner mindset, the habit of asking what a dollar can produce rather than only what it can purchase. And finally, it is delivered by the long game, the willingness to keep walking through the long, invisible middle stretch where nothing seems to be happening, right up until the moment everything you built quietly comes into view. None of this requires extraordinary luck, extraordinary intelligence, or an extraordinary starting income. It requires ordinary decisions, repeated with extraordinary consistency, over a long enough period of time. The person lying awake at 3 in the morning worrying about money and the person lying awake dreaming about what to do with it are not separated by fate. They are separated by the decisions we have walked through together in this audiobook, decisions that are available to you starting today, regardless of where you are starting from. Your $1,000,000 dream is not a fantasy. It is a plan waiting for its first honest step. Take that step. If this audiobook added value to your life, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to Money Mastery Audiobooks for more content just like this. We release new audiobooks regularly, all designed to help you master your money, master your mindset, and build the life you actually want. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next one.